All right, 1:30 on the dot. We're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. This is From Data to Insight, crafting custom GA reports in Looker Studio for website success. This is a workshop session, intended to be a workshop session, so feel free to get your laptops out and follow along as part of the presentation. Every single session I've been to so far has asked how everyone's DrupalCon has been, so I feel obligated to ask as well. So far, so good, right? Awesome. Anyone go to the Google Tag Manager session earlier? Yeah, awesome. So we're all Google Suite up here. Awesome stuff. Well, this is my first DrupalCon. I'm very excited to be a part and to be talking to you all about building Looker Studio dashboards. Just want to shout everyone out for being so welcoming as I navigate my first DrupalCon. So we'll go ahead and get started. So who are we? Why am I talking to you right now? My name is Cameron Panisi. I am a digital strategist at Sandstorm Design. My bread and butter is in analytics. So I am a huge self-prescribed data nerd. I love looking at this stuff, and I'm very excited to be able to share it with all of you. Near the back, we have some friends from Sandstorm, including Neil, who is a senior product owner at Sandstorm, as well as Joanna, who is a UX specialist. So again, intending for this to be a workshop session. So if you have questions, do raise your hand. One of the two of them is going to make their way over to you. They're going to try to help you out. And if we're running into some advanced problems, that's when they'll raise their hand. I'll scurry off the podium and see if we can help you out. Not present here today, but part of the Sandstorm team, Nathan Haas and Josh Hunter, are giving a presentation tomorrow between 9 and 9:50 a.m. If we have any front-end developers or designers in the room, they are giving a presentation from Figma to Function, bridging design and development with Storybook and Drupal. They are great folks. I highly recommend it if it's something you're interested in. A little bit more about who Sandstorm is. So we have almost or over 25 years of digital experience as a design agency. So we are a UX research, design, and development house. 15 of those amazing years we've spent building digital experiences for associations, nonprofits, and healthcare organizations. Over that time, we've gained almost 5,000 hours of usability in UX research. So we often like to say we know your users before you've even met them over that time. A large part of what we do, everything that we build is within the framework of accessibility. So we are CPAC certified. Diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging is a big part of what we believe in. And we are WBENC certified, meaning we are women owned and we are proud of it. Okay, so let's get to the reason that we're all here, right? GA4 has been out there in the world for a while, and if you have struggled with it, you're certainly not alone. One of my big responsibilities as a digital strategist was in migrating folks from Universal Analytics to GA4. Anyone in here go through that process themselves? Yes. Very fun when that countdown clock came up and it looked like it was a bomb timer that was like, all of your data is going to be gone if you don't do something right now. So we navigated through that migration, and we've ultimately ended up with a product that a lot of people feel like has some pitfalls compared to the reporting we were used to in Universal Analytics. So I attended a talk by the Higher Ed Web folks in 2024 that was called The GA4 Struggle is Real. And part of that research, they found that 76% of survey respondents said they, quote, significantly struggled with GA4. So our solution and what we're going to be walking through today is Looker Studio. It is another Google product that is free to use and get started with. It is a flexible reporting platform that integrates not only with Google products and specifically GA4, other Google products such as Search Console and Search Ads, as well as other third-party platforms. So again, the goal of this presentation is kind of to teach everyone here to fish. Instead of catching the fish for you, teach you all to fish so you can go off and build all of these amazing reports, not only with GA4, but other data sources as well. So As I mentioned, we're going to get started with creating a GA4, a basic but powerful report, and then we'll talk a little bit about how to style it, add different filters to it so that you end up with more flexible reporting than exists within GA4. A couple of notes on resources. If you do not have an existing GA4 property and you have your laptop with you and are following along, if you go to shorturl.at/capital G, lowercase g, 5, lowercase n, capital E, that will take you to a demo account page where you can pull up some data that Google provides for sessions like these. I will say that is a publicly available database, so if we all are hitting it all at once, it's possible that you might run into a data limiting error. Your reports might not be showing up, so we recommend you using your own data if you can, but if you want to experiment with Google's data, you can do so at that link. You can also view full documentation on all dimensions and metrics available in GA4 at the short URL y, lowercase v, capital W, lowercase p, capital V. And we'll screen share these in a moment. Just want to make sure folks have links. And then this is a blog. This presentation is a blog that we have written on our site. So you can either follow the link down there or see folks taking their phones out and snapping the QR code. So if you want to follow along with the written presentation, they'll probably have a fewer ums and uhs and ands in it. You can certainly do so there. So before we get started, I want to start first with the GA4 demo data. You all still seeing my screen? Okay, awesome. If I go to this link, let's get John Coltrane off. Oh my goodness, I didn't realize I was still going. When you go to that URL, you will land on this page, or if you just want to Google GA4 demo account, it'll be the first unsponsored link here at the top. That'll bring you to this page. To add the demo data for the Google Merchandise Store, you're going to scroll down, and then it's going to be this first link here that says GA4 property, Google Merchandise Store, web data. So if you click on that, it'll outbound you to Google Analytics, and then you'll have a new property available in your Google account. And then the other one that I mentioned was the documentation for all the dimensions and metrics that are available. If you either go to this short URL in the deck here, or if you search GA4 dimensions and metrics, it'll be the first unsponsored link. And then if you click in here, there's this giant list of all these different data points, what they mean and what they do. We'll cover some of these today, but if some of your questions are like, can I add this to a report? Does this come out of the box? You have all of this available. So for example, if you're curious about being able to pull in date data, you can just search date. It'll filter down into a list of available dimensions and metrics, and you can see which one best fits your needs. Ready to get started? All right, let's go ahead and get started. So the first step is going to be navigating to lookerstudio.google.com. When I do this, I am going to be brought immediately to the platform itself, but if you have not signed up for something before, if you go, for example, in an incognito window, you might end up on a marketing landing page that looks like this. As long as you click this blue Use It for Free button, it'll ask you to sign into your Google account, and then you'll be brought to this page. So you can see I've got a couple of reports that I've built already. Your screen will likely be blank. And then we can get started either by creating a blank report here from a template, or by creating within this button here, going down to report. As you'll notice, there are some templates that exist that Google provides, and this kind of gives you a very holistic understanding of how powerful, how many data sources exist for Looker Studio. Again, our presentation is focused on just GA4, but there is so much more that is available. So Google Analytics, e-commerce stuff, there's some BigQuery template dashboards, YouTube analytics, etc. So focused on web data today, but just goes to show you the breadth of support that Looker Studio has. As I mentioned, we're just going to start fresh. learn to fish, and then we'll go from there. So I'm going to click on this button right here. And this will bring me eventually to this screen. And this is a lot of information to take in at once. The eagle-eyed amongst you will see this Google Analytics button right here. What Looker Studio is asking us to do is to select a data source. So as I mentioned, we're going to be looking at Google Analytics, but you can already start to see the breadth of options that are available for you to create data visualizations in this platform. Anything that can be exported into a CSV or a Microsoft Excel sheet, you can do reporting on in Looker. And anything that exists underneath this Google Connectors heading is free to use. So lots of Google products in here, but if you're not seeing specifically, if you have some sort of niche data source, there are literally thousands of partner connectors. These are third-party connectors, as the name implies, that often are free to start with, but will incur a fee after some repeated use. So if you want to use Looker Studio and use it for free, stick to the Google connectors, but it's likely that someone has made some sort of connector for your data source if it does not live in here. Anyways, we are going to click on Google Analytics. I believe this may be a dynamic list, so if you're not seeing it exactly where I am, if you use the search bar to search for Analytics, you'll see it as the first option underneath Google Connectors. Once I click that, I'm going to be brought to this screen where it shows all of the different Google Analytics accounts that my Google account has access to. I'm going to use Sandstorm's data here, and then I will choose my property. It's likely if you work at a big organization, your data may be spread across different accounts through multiple properties. The way that we typically do it as Sandstorm is one account for the organization, but if you have multiple websites, you may have multiple different properties. So if you're doing it yourself, choose the one that more closely matches your site. Or if you're using the demo account, you'll see there's two properties in here. Go ahead and click on that Google Merch Shop option. And then once I click add, it's going to think about it for a second. And then it's going to give me a quick disclaimer. One of the advantages of Looker Studio is that you can share it basically the same way you would a Google Doc or a Google Sheet. So this is just a notice that's letting you know, hey, if you share this with the whole wide web, like your data is going to be available. So we're fine with that. I'm going to click add to report. And it's going to think for a second, and now I've got a data table. So again, a lot to be looking at here, but I want to start with taking a look at why we're recommending Looker Studio in the first place. You'll remember we talked through this giant list of dimensions and metrics here. One of the big pitfalls in GA4 that certainly we were feeling as Sandstorm and that we've heard from a lot of our clients as well is that the ease of configuration, the ability to add different dimensions and metrics within GA4, it's just not there. It feels like a more locked down experience. But in Looker, if I jump into the resource tab here and then click on manage added data sources, this is going to include a list of not only what we just added, but any additional data sources that we add in the future. And if I click edit, whoa, massive list, right? 372 dimensions. This includes dimensions that come out of the box with GA4, as well as any custom configurations you've done through Google Tag Manager. And all of these are available for us to plug and play and build reports with. So over 300 dimensions and just shy of 100 metrics. So lots to play around with here. But we're going to get started very simply with what we're looking at. So when you add a new data source to a new report, it's going to, by default, create a report that pulls in events and sorts them by views, which is not totally helpful. Those of you who may be more familiar with GA4 would know that the best way to look at this data would be to use the event count metric. If we switch that over, this data starts to look a little bit more neat. But I want to talk through sort of what we're looking at here, right? So if I click into any chart, either the default one that it pulls up, or if I add a new one as I'm configuring this report, you're going to see this side panel open up. And this includes our setup options and our style options. So we'll get to styling in a little bit, but I want to talk through first, like, how do we just get the data that we're looking for out of this report? You can see everything is sorted by dimensions and metrics. So dimensions are the quantifiable thing that we are trying to measure. So events, visits to pages, etc. And then the metrics are the values by which we're measuring them. So views, sessions, users, etc. For the purposes of our reports, let's say Sandstorm, we are based in Chicago, and we want to see how many folks in the city of Chicago have visited the site over the past 30 days. This does not show me that at all, so how do I get there, right? First, I need to start with my dimension. What am I trying to measure? Well, it would be nice to see what pages folks are getting to on the site. So I can use this data search over here. This is that giant list of dimensions and metrics that we pulled. If I search for page, I'm going to get a bunch of things that pull up, and we're going to go ahead and use page path in this example. This is everything that appears after the domain name. So this would indicate sandstorm.com/blog. This would be a specific interior page, how your CMS or nonprofit blog, et cetera, et cetera. And now we're starting to get closer to what we're looking at, right? The next thing would be to decide by what measure do we want to sort this table by. And I mentioned views, sessions, and users. All of that does kind of sound the same, but as a brief explainer, GA4 counts a view whenever a page is loaded. A session is a user's entire visit to the site. So if I came to the site, landed on the home page, clicked on the blog, and then read a specific blog and then left, that would be 3 page views in one session. And then users are individuals like myself. When you visit a website with GA4 loaded on it, when you get there, GA4 creates a unique user identifier to be able to tell, okay, this is Cameron, he's coming in on a desktop. So typically your user numbers are going to be smaller because one user can generate multiple sessions, and then within those sessions, they can generate multiple views. So I want to get a good grasp of individuals that are coming to the site. So I am just going to search for users. You see, I get this whole active list, 1-day active users, 30-day active users, a lot in here, new users. I think for the purposes of our report, total users is what I'm looking for. So I will just drag and drop that into the setup here. Just gonna think about it for a second, and now I can see for a certain time range, I know that our most popular page was the home page, followed by our healthcare page and the join our team page as the top 3. So this is a good start, but data is nothing without context, right? I just mentioned this is for some obscure date range that we don't know. So by default, when you create a new chart in Looker Studio, it's going to default to the last 28 days. And what I was doing to get there, I was just hovering over the Setup tab and then scrolling down. And there are ways for you to adjust this within the chart setup itself, but what we recommend is using a filter, because that's going to be an immediately obvious visual reference for anyone reviewing this data. Okay, this is the time range I'm looking at. If I adjusted the settings within here and then didn't provide any context, nobody knows what this data is for, right? So there's plenty of different filters. They're underneath this control bar. If I click here, you can see I have all these different options, and right underneath this divider is the date range control. I'm going to click on that. I get this little dialog box that pops up. I'm going to sit that neat and tidy next to the corner here, and now I have this calendar picker available for me to set a date range. You'll notice all of the configuration happens within this side panel over here. So there's no default date range set. So I would set the default using this dropdown. I can either use a fixed list or a fixed date range rather if I wanted to see Okay, from the 1st to the 8th, what did data look like for that? And everything will dynamically refresh. Or if I wanted to use some of the built-in date functions that Google provides, so this month, this quarter, this year, or if I want to look at the last 28 days, the last month, the last quarter, I could do so by setting the default date range there and then hitting apply. And when we set that default date range, that is what's going to appear anytime someone shows up on our report. So if I were to refresh this report, if I share it with one of you, as soon as you land here, it's going to show the last quarter's worth of data. But if I wanted to jump in, I was like, okay, I'm really only curious about, let's go the first week of December. I could jump in here, grab the numbers that I need, and then leave. The next time somebody comes back, if I refresh, you'll see it goes back to the last 28 days. Yeah, question.
Yeah, so the date range that's in the filter in the sidebar, do you have to do something so that they don't conflict or add together?
Yeah, so the question was, there are configuration settings within the chart itself. There are date controls here. Is there anything I need to do to make sure that these two dates do not override each other? By default, as long as you do not touch these date range settings, it's going to defer to the date range filter we have on the page here. If you were looking at a quarter's worth of data and there was a week where you had a bunch of traffic come to the site and you wanted to be able to report on that page, that is where you could jump in here and then set a custom date range, and that would always stay fixed to whatever you set for this table. But long story short, by default, nothing that you need to do. It will always default to this date picker here. Yeah, question?
Just curious, is there a way to get more than one date range control on a page, or is it only per page?
There is. So if I grab this, we're getting a little advanced here. So I like it, though. It's a great question. There's a great use case for it. What I did there is I just copied and pasted the date that I already wanted. And let's say, okay, the last quarter is great, but I want a more holistic look. Let's switch this over to the last year's worth of data. Then, oh, well, shoot, now both of my tables look the exact same. If I grab both of these charts and then I jump into the Arrange menu and then group them, then they will stay, only the ones within the group, you can control them through the grouping function. Yeah, that's a great question. Anything else at this stage? Cool beans. All right. One of the other things you might want to do with a report like this as well is be able to look at performative metrics. So that is adjusting based on, maybe we want to review quarter over quarter or year over year metrics instead of, grabbing snapshots of this year and last year. Maybe I want that data available to me in the report itself. Underneath the default date range options, you'll see that there's a comparison date range filter. If you check that on, by default, it's not going to select anything. But if I jump in here, I can either choose a fixed comparison period, previous period, which will just be the previous period, or the previous year for that date range. So currently I'm looking at 2024 in totality, but if I switch this over to last quarter, and then I wanted to compare Q4 to Q3, I could turn this date range on. I would say, hey, show me comparatively the previous period. I'd click apply, and then we get our comparison metrics. So this is a great way at an overview, at a glance. A lot of the time at Sandstorm, we'll do these quarterly check-ins and performance reviews where we're like, hey, this is where we're at. This is where we're trending. Here's the content that performed well. Here's the content that didn't perform well. And since we set it up to previous period, by default, it's going to show us quarter over quarter performance. But if I wanted to jump in here and I said, hey, we just launched a marketing campaign. I want to look at the last 14 days compared to the previous 14 days. I'll click apply, and it'll automatically generate those metrics for me. So super helpful there. Okay, let's switch this back over to the last quarter. Okay. So this is good. We're starting to get to where we want to get to, but I had mentioned for this example, we want to see where folks came in from the city of Chicago. So by default, this sort of table is always going to have one dimension and one metric, but we can add as many dimensions or metrics as we want. So I'm going to add the city dimension. I mentioned I was interested in the city of Chicago. I can just drag and drop that as I want. And then we can start to see data coming in. If I want to reorder these columns, you simply drag and drop one over the other, whatever order you want. And then let's say I'm interested in bounce rate as well. I want to see where folks are leaving the site. I want to add another metric. I can just drag and drop that in here. And then you can see not only is it going to bring in that additional metric, but it's also going to do those comparison numbers as well. So again, starting to get closer for sure, but not exactly where we want to be for a reusable report. I can confidently say, hey, for the last quarter, the homepage, we had 53 unique users and a 25% bounce rate. But if I wanted a holistic view of all the traffic from Chicago, it's going to be a real pain in the butt to take a look at every single one of these rows and tabulate everything else. So you might be thinking, time for another filter. I'm going to go back to the control menu. And then there's a bunch of different controls we could use to achieve this. The one that we find is the most reusable is the input box. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this over here, move this down a little bit. And you can see Looker was pretty smart. It knows that the filterable dimension that I want is city. So if I jump into the view screen here, this is what other folks are going to see. If I was interested only in the city of Chicago, I could theoretically. So currently, capital C, capitalization matters, folks. And there we go. And now we're all filtered. And this is reusable if we want it to be the city of Chicago. If I was interested, let's see if we got visits from Atlanta. I could do so and see where folks went, what their bounce rate was, etc. If I am not a stickler for capitalization, by default, this input box control is set to an equals condition. So it's looking for data that exactly matches whatever the user is searching for. But I can very easily just switch this over to contains. And then someone can jump in here, just type shy. Okay, well, that would have been cool if that worked, wouldn't it? What the heck? Oh my gosh. Pay no mind to the man behind the curtain. It's supposed to work that way, I promise. Yeah, right? Okay. If I wanted to switch the control field at any point, if I'm like, okay, this is cool, but maybe I'm just specific about the folks who went to join our team, at any point I can swap out this control field. Let's say I want to do page path. Drag that in. And now I can filter by join. I can see where folks are coming from, what specific roles they're applying for, et cetera, et cetera. This is great for reusable reports, right? So if you're trying to build a dashboard where it's like, hey, at any given moment, I want to be able to tell what city folks are coming from. But let's say we get a request from an executive that's like, hey, I need to know at any point where folks are coming in from Chicago. I don't want to have to type Chicago every time. You also have the option to add a filter to any chart. You can do that underneath the default date range settings. And you sort of build your filter in a way where you choose whether to include or exclude the criteria. You choose by what field you're filtering by, and then what value you're filtering by. So if I wanted this to always show Chicago without me having to custom filter it every time, I would set my default to include. I would use the city dimension, and I would have it equal to Chicago. There was a recent update to Looker Studio that includes this suggested values while typing thing. It's not amazing UX. I'm coming at you, Google, because if I just save this right now, it's going to say that there's no data. How can that be? I jump back into the filter. it didn't save what I wrote. I have to click on the option here, get that little blue bubble, and then it'll actually save. If you can't be bothered with that, like me, you can just turn this off, and then it will automatically save whatever you're entering. And then there we go. Now we have a report for the last quarter. If I wanted to filter down by page path, I could, and I've got all of these comparison metrics. But this report's pretty ugly, right? It's just a bunch of boxes randomly all over the place. The easiest way to style your reports, instead of going in one at a time, jumping into the style settings. There's a lot of settings in here. I referenced the blog that we have on Sandstorm Design for more information about how to style a report. I would recommend checking that out. But the easiest way to apply a style to the report is to jump into this File menu, then go to Theme and Layout. And then you'll see if folks have spent any significant time in PowerPoint or slides, this will look very familiar. So there are these templates with different colors that you can automatically apply. So let's get some dark mode going in here with Constellation. And then all of a sudden, all of our reports change. Things are looking a little bit nicer. And that's just sort of your starting point. It's the recipes of Looker Studio, if you will. We can always jump in and customize it to use a different report background. Maybe I'm a big fan of purple. Ow, my eyes. We'll go ahead and Control Z that real quick. But if you want to create a branded report that is using your brand's colors, your font, you have those options in here. I'm trying very quickly to find, yes, the primary report style. They do have Comic Sans in here, so yeah, isn't that nice? Awesome. But yeah, plenty of options for you to be able to customize your reports. As I had mentioned, we want to brand this report a little bit. We want to give data with context. So something that you'll be doing a lot is labeling your reports. There's this text box up here at the top, which is very similar to your Microsoft Word text box. I can type whatever I want. We'll call this DrupalCon 2025 example data. Beautiful. Let's go ahead and make that a little bit bigger. Let's bold it. I'm doing Comic Sans. You guys can't stop me. Beautiful. And there we go. And now we're providing more and more context. This is looking more and more professional. And we're well on our way on building a reusable report. I do want to cover, with the time that we have remaining, some of the additional chart styles that you can use. So by default, everything is going to show up in these rows and columns, which, if you're a data nerd like me, is kind of all I need. But a lot of the times you want to create a report that is exciting, engaging, tells a story in a way that is more visually identifiable than a data table. So if I jump into add a chart, which is over here, you're going to see there are all these different visualizations available to you. In the Part 2 blog on our site, we go into specifics about when is the best time to use any of these, what are the best metrics to combine with them. But for a simple starter report like this, I think it would be helpful if we could get a gauge on, hey, when is the most active day of the week? When are folks coming to the site most often? What we would recommend for that is a time series chart. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. I'm going to align it with my data up here. And then you'll see we had some interesting spikes on a couple of days. So that's information that you get through exploring these different visualizations that you might not get in a data table like this. But you'll notice the configuration for a time series chart is very similar to what you have going on up here. And you'll actually see Looker tries to be pretty smart. It builds any new reports you're adding contextually based on other data that exists. So it's already sorting by date and by total users. And again, if I wanted to filter this to just the city of Chicago, I could just apply my existing filter, and then we get a better look at just that city. And then, of course, trying to cram as much data as possible into a very small report, you are able to create multiple pages within a report. So by default, you start with one page, but the eagle-eyed amongst you may notice that there is this add page button over here. If I click that, it's going to create a brand new page. You do want to title your pages just for ease of use. So I would just call this overview. And then on this next page, you see it inherits all of the styling that we applied on the first slide. And then if I wanted to dig deeper into specific page performance or specific metrics, I could start building something out on this slide. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and look at some more visualizations. I know one that folks are pretty interested in pretty frequently is the split of traffic between different devices. That's feeling like a pie chart to me. So I'm going to go ahead and grab one and drop it in. And by default, as I mentioned, it's going to use event name and views, which is not super helpful. We are 100% page views 100% of the time. We'll want to narrow that down a little bit. So I'm going to go back and use total users for my metric. Excellent. And I mentioned what device folks are browsing on. So I'm going to use my search bar here. I'm going to search for device, and then I'm going to drag and drop in device category. And that's going to give me a really good split, 70-30. That's pretty even between desktop and mobile. I'll go ahead and grab my controls from this first slide. I'm just copying and pasting, bringing them in here. And we can see the data automatically adjusts. I do want to stop to take a second. Any questions for the folks who are following along on their laptops? Any questions so far? Yeah, in the back.
Hi, thank you. Is the input box for every chart, or is it you align it to search for one chart? Does that make sense?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Like if I type in, you brought up the input box under this second page, right?
Yeah, this one right here.
So now you're searching in that to pull up a device category, or is that still going to pull up page path?
So yeah, it's still going to pull a page path. Great question. So the question was, do I need to change the filter criteria from page to page? And yes, you do. As I mentioned, Looker does try to be smart when it's pulling in some of these other charts, but I grabbed page path here. That's what the control field was set. If I wanted to change it to device category, I would just click in. I would search for device category and apply it. And then if I only wanted to see mobile, I could see mobile. Any other questions? Cool. One of the other things I want to cover off on, if we add a bunch of new pages here, there are different ways in which you can organize these reports for folks who will be browsing them. So if I have these 5 different pages, and we're going to pretend that they all have data on them, I can start to segment my report by sections. So if I go ahead and create a new section, let's call this one Overview Metrics. Metrics. I can start to nest in different reporting underneath those sections. And what you'll see, the end user eventually ends up seeing kind of similar to the way Universal Analytics used to be, where you had all of your nested and custom reports underneath labels. You can start to nest things in a way that makes sense for you and your organization, right? One of the pitfalls of GA4 currently is that it feels like there's not a lot of ways to get exactly what you're looking for in a place where you can always have it accessible. These sections help folks to quickly identify what section of the report they're looking for and where they need to go. So maybe I have overview metrics here, and then we do a deep dive on, let's go social media metrics. I can start to nest my pages underneath by just dragging and dropping. And then if I go into the view section, now when someone comes to this report, they go, oh, okay, I know I need to get to these metrics on overview, and I also want to see like how our social is performing with those different sections. While we're talking about social, oh yeah, question in the back.
I was curious, if you go back to your first overview page,
Yeah.
is there a way to get from some of the data that you have there on the overview page to maybe start to dig down into deeper data? Like, so for example, if you have the path, if you wanted to see like that path and what's below it, or like if you wanted to see Chicago, like if you had, for example, a state path and then you wanted to see it in more regions, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a great question. So the question was, how do I get more granular with the data here? How can I have a report that is the same configuration but explores more and more granular dimensions? That is a great question, and that is possible. So I'm going to create a new report, and let's say we want to look at our geography as a whole, where folks are coming from across the United States. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to create a pie chart. I'm going to use the city dimension, pull that in by total users, and we can start to get there. But to your point, right, I don't want to, it's not the most effective use of real estate to just copy and paste 3 different pie charts and use different dimensions. What I can do within Looker Studio is enable this thing called drill down dimensions. And once I check that, Looker is actually going to be smart with the geography ones, but you can see it added continent, country, and city to this report, but nothing has necessarily changed yet. What you'll notice, though, is that the end user now has these new arrows here, and this is where they can drill up from city to country, and they can get a look at where traffic is coming in by country. And if I want to drill up even further to continent, I could do so like that. So yes, it is an option. Again, Looker tries to be smart and uses some default ones, but if you want to reorder in what way these appear, if you want to change what the default one is when someone is loading the report for the first time. So by default, if I share this report right now, it's going to show the city, but if we want to start big and then allow people to drill down smaller, I could set this default drill down level to continent. And then once someone comes here, they can sort of explore and drill down. Yeah, great question. Anything else, folks? Any other questions? Yeah.
So with you building all of these, how can you export this out into a user-friendly document where they can see all of this without having to come to Looker Studio?
Yeah, so the question was, how can I export all this data out of Looker? So it's a good question. The drill down metrics specifically, that's one of the dynamic elements of Looker. So in that case, you may need to create multiple reports in order to be able to export them out. But if I wanted to export this data specifically, what I could do is on the report page itself, I could click on these 3 dots here. Oh no, did they move it on me? I said it so confidently, too. They did. They moved it to the chart itself. So if I wanted to export this data out within this table header that's up here, if I click on More and then click on Export, I have a couple of different options. I can give the data that I'm exporting a name, and I can either export it as a CSV, an Excel sheet, or natively into a Google Sheet directly, and then that'll just open in another tab.
Exporting that as like a JPEG or anything like that?
That, I think you would just need to screenshot on your device. But yeah, good question. Maybe coming in the future. One of the nice things is that I think Google is very much aware that a lot of people are questioning the ability of reporting within GA4 itself. I'm sure they've seen an increase in traffic to Looker, and it has been getting a lot of quality of life updates. So maybe that's something that comes in the future. But yeah, screenshots for now.
So you
Yeah.
can export this to PDF so that you can have this?
There's a way to do the entire report as a PDF. So if I go into the view setting, where did they share? Yes. So share, this is how you can share it out as a dynamic link. Yeah, that's where you do your settings.
Right next to share.
The arrow.
Ah, okay. Thank you, folks, for helping me out here. Yeah. So underneath the tab, download report, you have the option download all pages or select pages. This is where you could choose where you want to export as a PDF. And then you have a couple of PDF options as well. Yeah. Thank you to the audience for helping answer that question. Yeah.
So let's say I built a series of reports for a given site, but then I want to, use those same reports for another site. Is there a way to synchronize this?
Yeah, absolutely. So the question was, okay, I've built this for one data source. What if I have another data source or a site? I really like the reporting in here. I just want to swap the data source. What you'll notice is that for all of the charts itself, there is a data source at the top of each report. So if you're looking to change that on a per report basis, you can do that here. Or if you're looking to change the data source for the entire report, you can jump into File, Report Settings, and then select a new data source. So by default, it's going to be the one we added earlier. But if I click on Add Data, that's then where I can go in, add a new GA4. So if I use the demo account, for example, let's add the merch shop. Just going to think about it for a second. Cool. Now by default, the data source is going to be the Google Merch Shop. So if I jump into any of these reports, like the overview, I may need to actually jump in here and swap it to the Google Merch Shop. But then you can see everything stays formatted. I can just switch it over to a new data source. Yeah.
So let's say you have like a style of a theme that you set up,
Uh-huh.
and now you want to like share it with the team and then have it be default. So
Mhm.
what was the same?
Yeah, so the question was, how do I sort of templatize this and then share it with the team so that they can use it? That's a great question. So within your theme settings, which I went through that pretty quick, File, Theme and Layout, you can customize your theme here, switch the colors, the fonts, whatever you need to do. And then what I was struggling to get through earlier, this share setting, this is where you can either add folks through email or you can share it as a dynamic link. They can get a copy of the report, and then what they can do if they want to make adjustments to it but keep the same style is they can go into the file setting, they can make a copy of the report, and then once they hit copy report, it's going to think for a second. But you'll see we'll be brought to a new screen with all the same reporting, but they can make whatever adjustments they want to. The style will be the exact same. It'll be preserved through the copies. So, excellent. I know we're starting to run a little low on time. We've got about 2 minutes remaining. You guys want to put me on the spot? What sort of data do we want to look for? Yeah.
Is it possible to join two different data sets together?
It is. Do I know how to do it in less than 2 minutes? No. But there is plenty of documentation out there on blending data sets. I can actually start to show you where that happens. So if I jump into a new chart, add that in here, you can see by default now we're using the Google Merch Shop, but underneath here there is a button that says Blend Data. And this is where you can start to sort of join your tables together. Google's even trying to help me out here and say, hey, dummy, this is how you do it. So there are tutorials on how to do it, but yes, it is possible. It's easier to do it if they're formatted in the same way, so two GA4 data sets. But if you're exporting data into CSVs somewhere, I know that there is a way for you to join GA4 data and Excel data. I know folks have done that with their historical backups of Universal Analytics data, so they've got completely holistic data. But yeah, great question. It's something that's absolutely possible, but not enough time to run through the specifics. Well, all right. Thank you, folks, for bearing with me. as I mentioned, this was my first DrupalCon and one of the first times presenting live to an audience. You all have been wonderful. I really, really appreciate you checking in here. If you're interested more on how Sandstorm can help you, there's a QR code there that'll take you to our capabilities and data analytics page. If you're interested in asking me questions about joining data sets, my email, my Sandstorm Design email is there, cpanisi@sandstormdesign.com. And also feel free to add me on LinkedIn as well. Thank you folks very much. I appreciate it.